Hello and welcome back to the Second and Short College Football Show. It is now week 7, which means we have officially reached that magical time of the year where we have 55 straight days with football. Coming off of the weekend that we just saw in college football with week 6, which I'm pretty sure I sat here last week telling you it was not all that good of a week. It turned out to be more than we could have ever imagined. And now heading into week 7, it is a fantastic precursor for what is to come for the rest of the year. A lot of scenarios that could be very important when we go down the line. So we got a lot to talk about today. Before we get into anything, make sure you are subscribed here on YouTube and turn on those post notifications. Make sure to like the video as well and leave us a comment. I'll tell you what to comment when you get to the end of the video. And of course, make sure you listen to the podcast. New episodes every Monday and Friday here on YouTube, as well as anywhere that you get your podcasts. And follow us on Instagram to keep up to date with everything we've got going on all of our platforms. Make sure to join the Second and Short subreddit as well. That is r/2ndand short. Submit your questions on there, either for the College Football Show or for questions time. If you never watched the College Football Show before, this is the way it goes. First, we talk about the biggest headlines around college football. Then we get into my top 10 in the nation heading into the week. That is followed by our top matchups of the week, then the ones to watch. And finally, we finish it out with the picks. And let me tell you, people, I told you last week, we're going 3-0. And guess what we did? We went 3-0. We moved to 8-4 on the season. So make sure you tune in for this week's picks for week 7. With all that being said, let's get into the headliners. We'll start off with some of the aftermath from last weekend. The SEC has officially fined Arkansas and Vanderbilt for rushing the fields after their upsets over Alabama and Tennessee, respectively. This is Vanderbilt's first violation of the field rushing rule, so they are fined $100,000. Meanwhile, Arkansas, with their second violation, is fined $250,000 for storming the field. Now, I don't think anybody should be fined for storming the field. Yes, I know it's a safety hazard, but it's a classic thing in college football. And in a moment like that, you had an unranked team upset the number 1 team in the nation and the number 4 team in the nation, both of those in the same weekend. I feel like it's something that should be celebrated rather than penalized. Not to say that the students weren't celebrating, because we saw all the videos from Vanderbilt of the students taking the field goal post and tossing it in the river, and then we saw it getting fished out of the river. It's a good thing they fished it out of the river, because now Vanderbilt is auctioning off different pieces of memorabilia from that game, including pieces of the goalpost. Other pieces of equipment that are available include pylons from the game-used balls, and helmets. I think this is a fantastic move by Vanderbilt to capitalize on this huge moment in their program's history. We got some midweek news out of the House versus NCAA court case, in which the settlement has gained preliminary approval, and in doing so moves us closer to a revenue sharing model within college athletics. We had already heard about this groundbreaking $2.8 billion settlement in this case. According to the plans of this approval, schools would be able to share revenue with athletes starting in the 2025-26 school year. And along with this new revenue sharing model comes a push that I did not see coming, but was certainly much needed. And the push that was given was the NCAA approving the elimination of the National Letter of Intent program. It is expected to make waves around the recruiting landscape. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be eliminating any kind of signatures needed for these commitments, but you will be signing a new financial aid agreement, which is more related to the revenue sharing models that we'll see in the near future. Under these new rules, transfer athletes will be able to sign with schools as soon as they enter the transfer portal. Once a prospect has signed the written offer of athletic aid, other schools will be prohibited from recruiting communication. This is just another leap in what we will see really reshape the landscape of college football in its entirety, and college athletics for that matter. There will be a lot of news coming out of this throughout the end of 2024 and into 2025 when we see this entire shift really shake up what college athletics has meant for so long. But I know you guys are here for the football talk, so let's head over to my top 10 heading into week 7. We'll start off with Texas coming in at number 1 after Alabama got knocked off by Vanderbilt. Texas was on a bye last week and lucky enough to just survive a tough weekend for a lot of ranked teams across college football. Got Ohio State moving up to number 2 after rolling by yet another opponent, this time the Iowa Hawkeyes. Then at number 3, I've got Oregon coming in. Just seems like the natural progression with the teams that lost ahead of them. They remain undefeated. They have started to look a little bit more impressive after the first couple of weeks of the season. Now we see them coming in at number 3 ahead of their huge matchup this weekend against number 2, Ohio State. Then at 4, I actually have Georgia. I think what we saw this week out of Georgia is a much better reflection of what we should be going off of rather than the Alabama game. And personally, I don't agree with the AP poll in putting Penn State at 4 only because of strength of schedule. I do have Penn State coming in at 5 because I think their wins have been more impressive than that of Miami, who I have at 6. Penn State, despite not really playing any big teams just yet on their schedule, have been consistently beating teams by a decent margin in all of their games, whereas Miami, especially for the last 2 weeks, have kind of stolen wins late in games against opponents that they should be taking care of. Coming in behind Miami at number 7 is Alabama, followed by number 8, Tennessee. Both those teams being knocked off by unranked SEC opponents last week. I don't want to overreact too much to the losses, but there will definitely be a shorter leash for these two teams going forward. At number 9, I've got the Clemson Tigers coming in, making it into the top 10. And I think it's really just because they've continued to be dominant. Obviously, the win over Florida State isn't as impressive as it would be in prior years, but an impressive win nonetheless. At number 10 is where I've got Iowa State, interestingly enough. I think they're a team that hasn't been getting enough conversation all year. I gave them a lot of spotlight on last week's episode. They were one of my picks as well, and I think they really deserve the credit that they're getting right now. I'm giving them a bump. In the AP poll, they're at 11. I've got them at number 10. I really like what Matt Campbell's got going on, and they are certainly a contender, if not the favorite right now, to win the Big 12. Just outside of my top 10, I've got Ole Miss, Notre Dame, BYU, and LSU. I don't have those in any particular order, especially ahead of a big matchup between Ole Miss and LSU, which will decide quite a bit for their college football playoff hopes going forward and potentially the SEC championship game. So I don't want to overreact too much on those two. BYU needs so much more credit than they're getting right now, and Notre Dame is just finding ways to win after that upset loss to Northern Illinois earlier in the year. I'd love to throw Texas A&M into the mix, but I'm not going to overreact just yet after the big win over Missouri. I still think we need to be patient with A&M and see how things develop. All right, that is my top 10 heading into week 7. Let me know down in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong. Now into our top matchups. We'll start with number 18, Kansas State, heading on the road to Colorado. I think there's really 3 big matchups that jump off the page this weekend, but I see this as one of the most important matchups, especially for the future of the Big 12 this season. This is a great test for Colorado as well. This is a Kansas State team that we've seen struggle at times, and they've also been as hot as anybody else. Now they go into Boulder and take on a Colorado team that hasn't necessarily been very successful as an underdog, and Kansas State, a road favorite coming in, gives Colorado the chance to prove something and also gives Kansas State the chance to handle a pretty solid opponent and really prove to everybody that maybe that loss to BYU was a fluke. I think last week was a good proving ground for both of these teams. It proved that both of them could go out and win a game against a pretty good squad. And I think for Colorado especially, they're trying to hold on to a top 4 spot in the Big 12 with a win here and stay undefeated in conference play. And with all the struggles we've seen out of Oklahoma State early in this year and the extended absence of Cam Rising for Utah, the Big 12 is wide open, and Colorado and Kansas State are both in the conversation of potentially making the championship game when it's all said and done. So as it stands, this is a huge matchup, and personally, I'm going to side with the road favorite and take Kansas State. You also have Travis Hunter, who is a game changer on both sides of the ball. So you can't count out Travis Hunter, as he is second in Heisman odds right now. I'm still going to go with Kansas State, though. Our next matchup is number 1 Texas heading on the road to Norman to take on Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. For Texas, I think the big news is that Quinn Ewers is back for this week. You lucked out last week with your bye week, and you missed out on what an insane upset week we had in college football, so you survived to see another day. You're back up to number 1 in the rankings, and you're taking on an Oklahoma team that has looked shaky at best throughout this season. When you look at this Oklahoma team, yes, they're coming off of a bye, but going into that bye week, they barely scraped up a win against Auburn. And Texas has had the fortune of the SEC kind of crumbling around them as they stand at the top, but you don't want to get brought down and caught in the rubble of all this destruction. Texas is in a tough spot right now. They play Oklahoma this week, UGA next week, then they've got to face the world beaters themselves, the Vanderbilt Commodores, the week after. Be on the lookout for this game to be maybe a little bit closer than you're thinking. I still think Texas ends up running away with it by the end, so I'm going to go with the Longhorns in a big victory, but you'll know it was a hard-fought one for Oklahoma. Now on to our next matchup. It's number 9 Ole Miss taking on number 13 LSU in a huge SEC matchup, which not only has implications potentially for the SEC championship, but definitely has some huge, huge implications for the college football playoff. This is really a big one, and I think it starts on the Ole Miss side. They're trying to piece back together their college football playoff bid after that painstaking loss to Kentucky. Meanwhile, LSU is kind of just skated by the beginning parts of this schedule. They've managed to just have one SEC opponent throughout this season, and it was South Carolina. And when you look at the madness that we've seen in the SEC already up to this point, this could be extremely important as we move forward. We're talking about two teams that right now are playing for potentially a spot in the SEC championship game, let alone a college football playoff bid, maybe down towards the lower part of the rankings. This is a huge matchup to look forward to. And I don't necessarily like either team in this position. I think for Ole Miss, they're coming off of a pretty strong win over South Carolina last week, but I'm still not totally sold on them being able to capitalize on that momentum. And on the LSU side, I haven't been all that impressed by many of their performances. Obviously, they opened the season losing to a USC team that has certainly taken a turn for the worse, and I just don't know how confident I really am in Brian Kelly, nor this team in general. I think what really plays to one team's advantage is the fact that it's in Death Valley. LSU has a huge home field advantage, and unfortunately, I think that's how it's going to go for the Magnolia Bowl. Now, it is one of my favorite rivalries out there, and we know rivalries can get dicey, but I'm going to go with the home squad in Death Valley and take the LSU Tigers. Now, on to our final matchup, the biggest matchup of the week. 2 of the top 3 teams in the nation go head-to-head. Ohio State heading to Eugene to take on the number 3 Oregon Ducks. This is really the Big Ten championship before the Big Ten championship. It used to be Ohio State, Michigan the week before, and then they would just play whoever won the West, which there was no telling who would win the West every year. Now, we're looking at this being the premier matchup every year that we get it, and for now, this is going to be the decider. Obviously, Penn State is probably the team that is worried the most about this game. The outcome of this game is extremely important to Penn State, who sits undefeated right now, with the really only test on their schedule being Ohio State. Penn State gets to avoid Oregon, Illinois, who's been extremely hot, as well as a number of good Big Ten teams. And I think Penn State is really riding on how this game goes. Obviously, Ohio State and Oregon have the most to lose and to win from this game. So on Oregon's side, they're still trying to recapture the attention of the nation after a shaky start to the season with a close game against Idaho and close game against Boise State, and just a number of performances that didn't quite look like what we were expecting out of Dylan Gabriel to start his Oregon career. To me, I think this is Oregon's best chance to regain the respect that they once deserved. And for Ohio State, they're kind of at the beginning of their schedule really ramping up. Obviously, people kind of attacked Ohio State for how their schedule started this season, but the last 2 weeks was Michigan State, then Iowa. Now it's Oregon, and they've got a number of other big games coming down the line. I think on both sides, obviously, they need to win. Duh. It's the number 2 and 3 team in the nation. They're looking to win the Big Ten. They're looking to be the number 1 team in the nation right now. So obviously it's must win for both. But I think for Oregon, this win would really prove something because, like I've said multiple times now, they kind of lost a lot of respect from how they started the season. If you can come out and beat the number 2 team in the nation, you're really going to put the eyes on you. And yes, maybe that adds some pressure, but it certainly takes a load off your shoulders if you know you can continue throughout this season undefeated. And for Ohio State, on the other hand, I feel like with how their schedule sorts out, they could potentially afford a loss here as long as they keep it very, very close. Now, I'm not saying Ohio State isn't worried about this game. This is probably the biggest matchup on their entire schedule, but they could potentially afford a loss here and still be okay if they win out. We'll just have to see what happens. Personally, I'm still kind of caught up on how Oregon started the season, so I'm going to go with the Buckeyes in this matchup. All right, that is all for the top matchups. Let's head into the ones to watch. We'll start off with number 4, Penn State, heading on the road to USC. It is a tough travel environment to head from Pennsylvania all the way over to Los Angeles. And Penn State is number 4 now in the rankings, and they don't have a good track record when they get ranked highly. It typically doesn't last for long. Now, does it have to end this week? Not necessarily, but I feel like seeing that 4 next to Penn State's name puts them on upset watch. Obviously, USC has a lot of things to work out. I've constantly criticized the coaching of Lincoln Riley this season, especially if you've been listening to the podcast on Mondays, and I don't know if he can coach them to a victory here, but I've also seen James Franklin mess up his coaching quite a bit as well. So to me, whoever coaches this game better might win because I'm not too blown away by what I've seen from Penn State. And this is a USC team that has the chance to show up and really turn some heads. I'm not going to make a pick in this game. I would assume it'll probably be Penn State that wins, but I think it's one to definitely tune into. Our next game is in the group of 5, and it is Coastal Carolina versus James Madison. This is a big one for the group of 5 bid in the college football playoff and as well just the Sun Belt in general. Last week, ULM pulled off a huge upset over James Madison. It really derailed a potential run at that group of 5 bid for James Madison. Now, I don't think they would have been allowed to get that group of 5 bid, but they could have ended up being one of the highest ranked group of 5 teams and certainly could have contended for the Sun Belt Championship. And Coastal on the other side is very much still alive and looking for that group of 5 bid. And I think a win in this position, especially on the road at James Madison, could give Coastal Carolina a little bit more of that push that they need right now as they continue a pretty strong season up to this point. So I think this is really just one to watch because of its potential importance down the road, especially for the Sun Belt, but also potentially for that group of 5 bid. The next game we've got is Vanderbilt going on the road to Kentucky. And this one, obviously it's not that appealing, I guess. I think it's more just that Vanderbilt is coming off of such a monumental victory over Alabama, and we've seen Kentucky play some good games up to this point, playing it close with Georgia, getting a close win over Ole Miss. Now Kentucky is a 14-point favorite against the team that just beat the number 1 team in the nation. And I was really close to thinking about making a pick here that maybe Vandy would cover that 14-point spread. I think I'm just going to sit back and watch this one. I think that's the way to go about this game because Vanderbilt is super, super weird if you're looking on paper, especially on the gambling side. So I would say this is just a game to sit back and enjoy. Diego Pavia gave us so much entertainment last week in that win over Alabama. Let's see if Vandy can go out and do it again. As it stands right now, they're a 2-touchdown underdog, and if they do pull off the win and it closes at plus 14 or more, Vanderbilt could become the first team to win back-to-back games as a road dog of 14-plus points since 2004. But I think the most important part about this game is you cannot sleep on Kentucky just because of what Vanderbilt did last week. Yes, it was the unimaginable outcome, but Kentucky might still just be a better team. For our final one to watch, I've got an ACC matchup between Louisville and Virginia. This is a big one for the Cavaliers. They're looking to keep their shot at an ACC championship game appearance alive. As it stands right now, they're 4th in the ACC and certainly have a chance of jumping up. They've definitely got a difficult schedule ahead of them, but if they're really that good, they could take on Louisville and really start heading in that right direction with a lot of momentum. Because Louisville is a good team. Yes, they're 3-2, and those 2 losses have come in consecutive weeks, but to good teams. They lost to an SMU team that is ahead of Virginia right now, and they lost to a Notre Dame team that is a top 15 team in the nation. Obviously, Louisville is on a bit of a downturn right now with those 2 losses, but that also means that this could also be a bounce back spot in this particular matchup. They don't necessarily look that good. I think Virginia is maybe the more enticing team on paper, but you can't count out the idea of the bounce back. It tends to work out a lot of times, and for me, I think Louisville's in a really good spot to potentially do that here. I personally kind of want to root for Virginia in this matchup just because it's a team that we don't typically get to see be successful on the football field, but something in the back of my mind can't shake the idea of Louisville in a bounce-back game here against Virginia. All right, that is all for the ones to watch. Let's get into the Week 7 picks. Before we get into anything, I will remind everybody I am 21 years or older. I do not live in a gambling state. Therefore, I will not be putting any money on any of these picks. These are simply what I think about some of the games that I see on the board. This is not gambling advice, nor will I be putting money on it. If you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Now, with our first pick, I'm going to go with a service academy, and it's one that has been buzzing for the first couple of months of the season. I'm going to go with Army -26. Army is taking on a UAB team that has been abysmal to this point. And obviously, we know what we've been hearing about Army, and they are the real deal, as it seems. They are one of 4 teams that is undefeated against the spread this season, and they're one of 2 teams alongside BYU that is undefeated straight up and against the spread. This is a team to look out for, and I think when you're looking at lines, Army is super enticing right now, especially when you look across the other way, and the UAB Blazers are 2-3 against the spread this season, and they're 1-4 straight up. Army's going to win this game, and I think they're going to dominate. They just got to hold on for all 4 quarters. Meanwhile, UAB can't hold on at all to any games they play. So I love Army -26.5. Shout out to the service academies. It's always fun football to watch. Just a little reminder, 3-0 last week, and I called it. So right now, I know we're already 1 pick in. I'm feeling lucky. We're going 3-0 again this week. 8-4. All season long. Let's get into the second pick. We're going Kansas State money line. As it stands right now, it's -190. I like them a lot to just beat Colorado. Kansas State just kind of seems like the right pick in this scenario because Colorado just hasn't really done it at the biggest stage just yet. And in this time under Deion, they've been a horrible underdog. Under Deion Sanders, Colorado is 2-8 as an underdog. The first of those wins was the very first game they played with Deion Sanders against TCU, and the last one was last week against a UCF team that just didn't look like themselves. I think I've seen a lot more consistent play out of Kansas State throughout this year. Obviously, the BYU game, like we mentioned earlier, is a bit of an outlier, but Kansas State seems to have what it takes to beat this Colorado team. There's far too many question marks around Colorado. I obviously can't count out the ability and the impact that Travis Hunter has on the game, but what I do know is that with Kansas State, Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens just get things done. That's what I think will happen here. Maybe they don't win by a big margin, but they get things done. Give me Kansas State money line. And for the last pick, I'm going to have fun with it. We haven't done one of these yet. This is one of the few times we've even done money lines. I'm going to go with an over-under here. And everybody knows life is too short to bet the under. Give me over 60.5 for Boise State versus Hawaii. Little midnight snack in the Mountain West. I know it doesn't work the same as the midnight snack in the Pac, but 11 p.m. start in Hawaii. I think it's just going to be a blast to watch this game. You're really not going to have that many games on. I think Colorado will be on at this time. I think they're a 10:15 start Eastern time. This one an 11 start Eastern time. So you're going to be flipping between these two, checking up on these picks, seeing if I'm right. And I think the big thing is obviously Boise State is unbelievable at scoring points right now. They're undefeated with the over this season. And of course, Ashton Jeanty is unbelievable. He's probably going to score all the points that they score in this game. And Hawaii has been giving up 120 rushing yards per game to human running backs. So I don't even know what's going to happen for Ashton Jeanty. What I do know is that we did say on Monday, this is officially an Ashton Jeanty podcast. This is an Ashton Jeanty for Heisman podcast. We will be promoting him at all times. So expect some Ashton Jeanty interweaved in every single post that you see from every single second and short account. And I think in this game, you could maybe look at Boise State to cover. They're plus 30 right now, which is steep. That's kind of my only apprehension is they do give up a lot of points, and that is a steep spread to cover. I'll go ahead and give you the stats if you want to look at that spread. Boise State is 3-0. Win 30-plus point favorites over Hawaii. And the last time that Boise State lost to Hawaii was 2007. Since then, Boise State is 7-2 against the spread when taking on Hawaii. So do with that what you will, but I'm going to put over 60.5 on the bet slip. All right, that is it for the college football show this week. Make sure you are watching these games. We've got a great week. Week 8 coming up next week. You got to tune back in. So the best way to keep up is to subscribe here on YouTube and turn on those post notifications. You'll know whenever any episode, podcast, any other side content we're doing. Of course, the Second and Short College Football Show and everything else we've got going on YouTube. You'll know everything about it if you turn on those post notifications. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and comment how many yards Ashton Jeanty will have this week against Hawaii. Once you're done doing that, make sure you follow us on Instagram to keep up to date with everything we've got going on. Join the Second and Short subreddit, r/2nd8nd short. Any questions you leave there will be answered either on Questions Time on Friday episodes or here on the College Football Show if you'd like to ask any questions. Finally, make sure you listen to the podcast Mondays and Fridays here on YouTube or anywhere that you get your podcasts. Enjoy Week 7 of college football. I'll catch you guys right here next week. See you later. Peace.